Hello, my name is Ryan Speck, and today we'll be going over visualizing hypothesis testing. So for our agenda today, I'll give a brief explanation on null and alternate hypothesis testing, the 4 hypothesis testing examples of a test of a mean, comparing 2 groups, efficiency comparison, and the correlation test. I'll then give a brief explanation on my takeaways for this presentation, and then of course open the presentation open to any questions. A null hypothesis, which is usually represented by H0, is a hypothesis set up to be rejected in order to support an alternate hypothesis, which is usually labeled HA. When used, the null hypothesis is presumed true until statistical evidence in the form of a hypothesis test indicates otherwise. Essentially, we're going to do our test to prove that the null hypothesis can be rejected. Otherwise, we assume that that null hypothesis or test is true until we do so. The alternative hypothesis, which is represented by HA, which is the opposite of the null, is a statement expressing a relationship between the 2 variables or indicating a difference between the 2 groups. So here in visualization number 1, we have an example of a test for a mean. Along the y-axis, you have the probability of a defect, and then of course along the x-axis, you have the number of defects out of 100. So the research question here is, on average, are the widgets from Acme Widget Company defect-free? So here, to set up our null and alternative hypothesis testing, we would set up the null hypothesis is that the average number of defective widgets equals 0. The population equals 0. The alternative hypothesis would be the average number of defective widgets is greater than 0. Here in visualization 2, comparing 2 groups, we have the major league home run hitting team and the minor league, more home run hitting per team. So on the y-axis, we have the number of home runs, and then of course on the x-axis, we have the fraction of the team that are home run hitters. The minor league bell curve is represented in red, and then the blue bell curve is represented for the major league teams. So the research question is does the average major league team have more home run hitters than its corresponding minor league team? So here we would set up the null hypothesis is that the major league home run hitters per team equals the minor league home run hitters per team. And so we would assume that there is no difference between the 2 currently until we run our test. Of course, the alternative hypothesis that we're wanting to prove is that their major league home run hitters per team do not equal minor league home run hitters per team. Visualization number 3 is an efficiency comparison. So here we have the single queue blue servers versus the single queue with multiple red servers. Then of course on the right we have our 2 different bell curves, the number of hours observed, 10 and 4, and then of the number served per hour. So the research question is the efficiency curves of the red and blue teams were recorded. Do the teams have equal mean efficiencies? So the null hypothesis here would be that there is no mean difference between the red and blue groups, and that the alternative hypothesis is that there is a difference in mean between the red and blue groups. And as you can see in the red and blue curves, that there would be a difference in the means for the 2 curves. So in this case, you could reject the null hypothesis as an example. Here in visualization 4, the correlation test, this study has already established that there was a correlation test and found significant correlation. As you can also see in the scatter graph to the left, that the p-value was 0.0001, which shows that there was a significant correlation. So in this case, the important question was what were the study's null and alternative hypotheses when doing this study? So here we would set up the null hypothesis is that there is no relationship between miles per gallon and the weight of the vans, and that the alternative hypothesis is that there is a relationship between miles per gallon and the weight of the vans. And so in this case, we already have established that we'll be rejecting the null hypothesis and that there is a significant correlation in the weight of the vans and the miles per gallon of each van. So some important takeaways from this presentation is that when creating a hypothesis test, you want to make sure that each hypothesis is clearly defined with its null and alternative hypothesis. and to remember that a hypothesis is set up to reject the null in order to support the alternate hypothesis. Another important takeaway from this presentation is that when using visualizations help to quickly identify the null or alternative hypothesis or show a trending correlation between the variables. You have to remember that visualizations help take excessive data or over a large time frame will help develop the trends and are implementing them into understandable visuals of data that might be complex or hard to understand. And that visualization might help you give a more clear correlation or understanding of what the data is trying to show you that you're presenting. So I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and of course if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.